Oh, whoops. Okay. I don't know how I did that. Okay. Okay.
It's a very long year this year, Pam. It's a leap year.
It's a leap year. That's right. Yes.
Months.
Yes. Right. Sorry about that. Okay. Right. We're ready to start. Let me share the screen. One moment. Yes. Needless to say, I'll correct that in a minute, just for everyone's benefit. For posterity, let's correct that. Okay. Here we go. Right. New share. Right. Oops. So, what just happened there? Okay, that was very confusing. I just heard myself twice. Oh, now it's frozen. Oh, we're back. Okay, right, let's try again. Sorry, share screen. Here we go. Right. Okay, let's correct the date. Let me. No, it's not going to let me. Never mind. Forget it. Okay. Try one more time. It's determined to keep that date. It won't let me change it. Okay, here we go. Never mind.
Right. Because there's work going on next door. It's a bit noisy.
Oh, here we go. Right. Okay, Iris, over to you.
Right. Moses, let's start again. Moses assembles the people of Israel and reiterates to them the commandment to observe the Shabbat. He then conveys God's instructions regarding the making of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. The people donate the required materials in abundance, bringing gold, silver and copper, blue, purple and red dyed wool, goat hair, spun linen, animal skins, wood, olive oil, herbs and precious stones. Moses has to tell them to stop giving. A team of wise-hearted artisans make the Mishkan and its furnishings, as detailed in the previous Torah readings of Teruma, Tetzaveh and Kitissa. 3 layers of roof coverings, 48 gold-plated wall panels, and 100 silver foundation sockets, the parchet, veil, that separates between the sanctuary's 2 chambers, and the masach, screen, that fronts it, the ark and its cover with the cherubim, the table and its showbread, the 7-branched menorah with its specially prepared oil, the golden altar, and the incense burned on it, the anointing oil, the outdoor altar for burnt offerings and all its implements, the hangings, posts, and foundation sockets for the courtyard, and the basin and its pedestal, made out of copper mirrors.
And a partridge in a pear tree. Right. Did you, anyone notice any deja vu here?
Sorry, what did you say, Rabbi?
Did you get any deja vu from this week's Sedra?
Well, things have been mentioned before, I think, haven't they?
More than mentioned. They were, they elaborated quite at length in the Parsha of Teruma and Tetzaveh, as it says here, right? They're now restated here because the first time it was the instruction, and here it's them actually doing it. Now, anybody know anything about koshering things and kashering things? There's different ways to kasher things, right? So certain things you have to basically heat in fire. So for example, you may have seen people using blowtorches, or certain things you dip in boiling water.
It depend on how the item is used. If it's
very good. Yes.
If it's used on as a fire with a fire, you use a fire to kosher it. If it's used with water, you use boiling water to
correct
kosher.
Very good. So something that's had a boiling liquid in, you kasher with boiling water, or something that's used for cooking water, or maybe a utensil or something that's used in fire. I don't know what the obvious things are. I mean, the classic one is like a spit or something. I don't know, no one uses that anymore for shwam or something like that. Something that's used directly in fire, you would kasher in fire. So an oven, right? An oven has it's not liquid, it's heat, whether it's electric or gas. So if you want to kasher oven racks, it's no good dipping in boiling water. You have to basically heat them with a flame of some kind. The ring on the top of your stove is not used in liquid, it's used in fire. It's used as a heat source. Again, it might be electric, but it's the same principle. So how do you kasher that? You have to kasher it with basically with fire, with intense heat. Okay, if you want some practical guidance on that, one very easy way to kasher a ring, though it can cause damage to your worktop, is simply to put a piece of heavy foil or a blech on it and put it on full, because that basically radiates all the reflects all the heat back, and it gets very hot very quickly. Anyway, it's a different conversation. So there is an interesting principle here. everyone's heard myths about sticking things in the ground.
Yes,
Right.
about knives, isn't it?
So I believe that the way when you stick something in the ground, some of you may, I don't know if you know David Gerson from Cardiff, he's a bit mischievous. So once someone was visiting the shore and told them that you mustn't shake hands to the rabbi. Shake hands to the rabbi after sticking in the ground for 3 days. It's getting slightly mixed up there. There is a type of there's an issue which most people are not aware of, which is particular to, let's say, knives, that, for example, if you cut into a piece of treifa meat, we say that there's something called when you cut something with a knife, the juice oozes out. So although it's not hot, like heat, which is normally a kashrut problem, but the fact that the pressure creates possibly some heat of friction, but also usually puts immense pressure on whatever you're cutting, and you will get an oozing of liquid can potentially cause kashrut problems. So if you have a knife that was used, let's say, to cut and to press a piece of treifa meat, then the way of kashering would be to basically simply press the knife. Now, how do you press a knife? Stick it in the ground. I believe that's where that method comes from. It's quite an unusual one. But the principle is, Iris is quite correct. The principle is that you have, basically, you do the opposite of what you did in the first place to cause the problem. If it was used in fire, you kasher it in fire. If it was used in liquid, you kasher it in liquid, etc. So this is something called tikkun. A tikkun means a correction. So we find this quite often generally, that somebody, let's say somebody feels that they have a problem with lashon hara and they're gossiping too much. They might take upon themselves some kind of mitzvah in relation to, I don't know, they might decide they're going to, take a vow of silence or something like that. It's not a really Jewish thing, but So anyway, what's the relevance of that? Let's have a look at this week's Seder. This week's Seder starts off Vayakhel. Vayakhel means to gather. Anyone recognize the word for anywhere else? Derivative of Vayakhel?
When God told Moses to gather the people.
Right. So Vayakhel Moshe. What do you call what is a congregation often called in Hebrew? Or community? A kahilah. Right, a kahal. Right? Yes, correct. Kahal or kahila, both the same word. I'm not sure why they're interchangeable. Often in a siddur in Hebrew, it will say chazan v'kahal. The chazan is the chazan, the kahal is the congregation, or kahila, kahal, same root, yes. So it's from this root. Kahal is to gather. The chief rabbis often talked about the difference between an Eidah and a kahila, that an Eidah is a group of people who bear witness to something, like Eidut is testimony. So that's where the phrase Adat Yisrael comes from, by the way, or Eidah Charedit and things like that. It means a group of people who basically have a similar ideology. So they might not be friends, they might not be in the same social circle, but they gather for davening. So it makes sense to call a minyan of like-minded people who gather for davening an Eidah. But a kahila is a gathering of people. It's a gathering of disparate people who have come together because of some shared purpose. That's very different. So our communities are very much a kahila. It's not just a group of people, a minyan, that come to daven. It's people that gather for all kinds of reasons. So, and you may recognize the word hakel as well, which is, I think, the 612th mitzvah, I think, or 613th. It's one of the last couple. That after Shemitah, they would gather everyone in the temple, hakel. So, yes, now, Moshe gathers everyone for a positive purpose. What are they going to do? They're building the Mishkan, and he's also going to tell them about Shabbos, which comes up in this week's Sedra. However, we find the word elsewhere as well. We find the word previously in last week's Sedra. Let's have a look. Right. Now, this is from last week. Who would like to read the English? And I'll just emphasize the Hebrew.
When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us a god who shall go before us. For that fellow Moses, the man who brought us from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him."
Right, crucial word, it's got black behind it. Vayakhel. He gathered the people, right? They communed together, community, right? Social network, in quite literal sense of the word. So I mentioned earlier about COVID. Look, there were times we had no choice. We had to daven at home, but it's not one thing I think everyone's realized is that it's not a natural state of being for people to be alone, right? We're going to see that. We know it's not. People are naturally social. Right? Social network doesn't just mean Facebook. It's basically the basis of family and communities, that people network together. They get together for things. They commune together. So unfortunately, when it comes to the golden calf, the people were gathered, but they were gathered against Aaron. They were gathered to build an idol. So they gathered for the wrong reasons. Anyone else know someone who gathered for the wrong reasons?
The one that went into the pit, I've forgotten the name.
Right, Korach.
Followed up.
Korach.
Korach.
Right. So he gathered people. I think by Korach he took. So last week, Cedric, we have this word Vayakhel, which is related to Vayakhel, it's slightly different conjugation. And here in this week, what do we have? Who'd like to read this week? Right at the beginning of the Parsha.
Moses then assembled the whole Israelite community and said to them, "These are the things that Hashem has commanded you to do."
Right. So completely different, right? So previously they gathered for nefarious purposes, and now they're gathering to be given the word of Hashem. It's no accident that uses the same word, right? It's basically a, if you like, what do you call it? We're going to can't think of the word.
Rehash.
No, there's a word for it when you take control of something and like we're not redefine. I can't think of the word, but anyway, take ownership of. There's a word for it. I can't think of it. We're going to re-something the word, right? Previously, they were gathering for nefarious purposes. Now they're going to gather for righteous purposes. If somebody wants to ask the Rebbe about, I don't remember how it came up, but it's a very famous quote the Rebbe said that during the Shoah, people were hunted down in hate, and the only antidote to that is to, the exact phrase doesn't translate very well, but to hunt people down with love. In other words, the Nazis sought out every Jew for nefarious purposes. We should seek out every Jew for opposite purposes, to show our love and care for them, basically. So you have often a tikkun for something is to reimagine it in a different way. So here you have, by Vayakhel, they gathered against Aaron, against God. And now Moshe says the first thing we're going to do, because the golden calf happened publicly, the breaking of the tablets we know happened publicly. So now the first thing you have to do is have a public gathering, right? You know how when a newspaper prints something sensational, it's always front page news. And when they print the correction, it's always, somewhere on page 35 on the bottom in small print, yes? Right? Or when someone's accused of a terrible crime, it's on the front pages. When they're acquitted, it's not news often. You saw this with the, what was it called? Operation U-Tree. U-Tree, was it? No, U-Tree was the one that, the Jimmy Savile one. What was the one that was bumbled with this Nick guy? With Leon Britton and all that lot. And I don't remember what it was called. Maybe it was U-Tree. But anyway, people were defamed terribly. Leon Britton's a good example. He was on the front pages when it was all proven to be basically that there was no case to answer. That, of course, didn't make it to the front pages. So to effect a change and a tikkun, which means a fixing or a correcting, to repair something, you have to have an equal force, an opposite force. So if something happened in front of the whole community, the apology has to take place, or the correction has to take place. So Moshe very pointedly gathers the entire community. What does he do once he gathers them? So I didn't actually print the sources here because it'd be several chapters, but I did mention it earlier if anyone remembers. What are two mitzvahs which are basically mentioned in this week's Sedra, very central items? If you remember from earlier, great. If not, you might know anyway.
The atonement for Yom Kippur?
It's not in this week's Sedra.
Okay.
Making the Mishkan.
Thank you. Building the Mishkan, the tabernacle, yes. And another one?
Keeping Shabbos.
Yes, Shabbos is given once again. Shabbos appears a few times. So these are two mitzvahs. It's not accidental. The two mitzvahs that Moshe basically then gives them is the building of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, which ultimately led to the temple, which ultimately led to the shul, right? So that's a holy space. It's a holy place, yes? Right? As much as we tell people that, your home is your temple and all the rest of it, we've always had holy places. The first of those was the Mishkan. And although we have a beautiful quote, which we quote time and again, which says, "Va'asuli mikdash," they should make for me a holy sanctuary, v'shachanti b'tocham, and I will dwell within them. And Rashi says, what do you mean within them? Not Rashi. Who says? I don't remember. One of the commentaries says, what it should say, I will dwell in the Mishkan. It says, I will dwell in them. So in each and every Jew, that basically brings God into their lives. But they also had a physical place. So the concept of sanctuary, a place you go, a shul, a temple, a Mishkan. And then Shabbos is an oasis in time, right? Shabbos is a sanctuary in time. So in this week said you have two, it's a sanctuary of space, of community where we gather together, and a sanctuary of time where we also gather together as it happens. Now, we know in Judaism that the individual is very important. Yes, every life is like a whole world. You save a life, you save a world. We're all in God's image, but we're also different. And yet, we may be unique and individual, but if you look at Judaism, it's anything but individual. A lot of our observances, a lot of our structures are communal. Right? It's actually quite hard if you're an introvert, really. I mean, if you're an introvert, you could go to shul 3 times a day and just not stay, go to shul on Shabbos and not stay for Kiddush. But actually, seriously speaking, if you're not a sociable person, Jewish life can be difficult because Shabbos meals and Yom Tov meals and shul and davening and, Purim parties and Hanukkah events and, shiurim even and all kinds of things generally involve doing things with other people. There may be people who have loved lockdown if they're solitary people, but most people are not. Yeah. Most people are social people. And the truth is, even if you're not a social person, one of the beautiful things about the structure of a shul, if it's functioning correctly, is that you can be somebody who's very shy, and you can still get something out of the experience of community that you might not get if you had to seek out a social circle. If you had to seek out a social circle, you might not seek out that circle. But because you all go to the same shul, daven together, you have an automatic social life. You hopefully get invitations for meals and things. I can think of 1 or 2 people that's definitely the case. So this is the power of community and the power of Shabbos. So as important as the individual is, the collective is very important as well. We do things in a collective way. And of course, we also know we have a collective responsibility when something goes wrong, that we're all liable, right? We've been learning the book of Joshua Sunday mornings. We saw that the whole nation gets punished because one chap plundered the spoils, because we're all responsible for each other's behavior. Now, where does this come from? Right at the beginning of Bereshis. It's funny, I edited this. Well, let someone read it, very famous quote we've quoted many times. Yes, who'd like to read?
Can I read?
Everyone. Please do. Deborah, yes.
God said, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a fitting counterpart for him."
So initially, the translation which I pulled up from Safaria said, "It's not good for the human to be alone. I will make a fitting counterpart for them." And I thought, that makes no sense because the whole pasuk is talking about man. But then I remembered also that if you look in Bereshis, it initially says that God created man and woman together. And there's a whole idea that Adam initially may have been slightly more asexual. I'm not sure. But anyway, it's not good for man to be alone. First thing God does is makes a partner for him, right? People are naturally social animals, right? Ours is a religion of community. Our holiest prayers can only be said in a minyan, right? The minimum definition of a community. We pray as a community. We are very much the we. So to atone for sin committed as a community, what do? You don't say to the individuals, you must each go and bring a sin offering and do this and that. We as a community are guilty. We as a community need to respond, and we consecrate our community in time and place as an antidote. So basically, let's be blunt. What is shul to most people? And even in religious communities, there's plenty of people that daven 3 times a day, but don't go to shul every day. What is shul to most people? If you say, what is a shul? Tell me what happens in a shul. What answer would you probably give in terms of frequency?
Gathering.
When?
When you go to shul.
What day of the week?
Well,
Shabbos.
could be
You probably say Shabbos morning, right? Somebody say, what's... the last bastion of most shuls, even if they don't have a weekday minyan, is going to be Shabbos morning, right? So what is a shul? A shul is a place where people gather together to pray, often on Shabbos. Not only, but that's the main day. Pretty much any shul is busy on Shabbos. So you've got these two things. You've got the Mishkan, which is the tabernacle, the holy place that's consecrated, that's a place given over to God, which is our shuls today for that role. They are sanctuaries. They are places dedicated to religious activities, mitzvahs and prayer. And you have Shabbos, which is appointed time.
But isn't it also a place where people feel comfortable to be with other people who are similar to them? So you can use it for a whole host of different things during the week.
That, were you here for the Adar Kahila discussion?
Probably not.
Right. So that's the difference in Adar and Kahila. We start off by saying Vayakhel means that Moshe gathered the people, right? The Kahila or Kahal is a gathering of people, but it's something more than that. It's quite a wide gathering. You know, you would use the term Kahila for a community, which might well include different ages and different stages, different social strata, etc. When you use the phrase Adar, which means basically from the word edut, which means testimony, which is also used to refer to congregation. So, for example, the spies are referred to as an Adar Hara, a wicked congregation. What makes them an Adar? They have a similar united purpose. So when 10 people come together in, I don't know, Clifford Chance, law firm, I think they have a lunchtime minion. Some Berwin Leitner or whatever have a lunchtime. I think Clifford Chance has a lunchtime minion. So when people gather together, right, they're not social friends. They may become friends. They're gathering with a united purpose, common purpose of praying mincha, and then they leave at the end of it, right? When we call around for a minion for Levaya and people don't even know the nifta, they are gathering for a common purpose. They're not gathering because they live in the same community or, you know, their family friends or their kids go to school together. They're gathering for a very specific purpose. So that's an Adar. But a Kahila, which is how we would define most of our shuls today, is absolutely a place of gathering of disparate people for different purposes. Sally is correct. And if the Mishkan is only there for the purposes of directly reaching God and davening, that doesn't really address the gathering. So you're correct. People are very quick to always say, Rabbi, shul is a bet Knesset, a house of also gathering, really, gathering together. Knesset is also together. Right? I don't know if that's where Knesset comes from, Parliament, what the exact intention of the word was, but it's a place of gathering. Kahila is a gathering of disparate people. So yes, if you would ask most people what a shul is a place that people go on Shabbos morning. When I was in Cheder, there were kids that didn't even know Shabbos morning existed. I remember once, one of my teachers used to go to shul regularly, one didn't. And one said, oh, it was nice seeing you yesterday. And one of the kids in the class said, what was yesterday? I said, what? It was, we go to shul every week. They're like, what? Didn't know that.
That probably is still true.
Oh, it's probably even worse. So, you know.
Jewish school.
Bless you. I used to ask a lot of kids when we say the Shema in shul. So most of them had no idea because they come from Musaf on Shabbos. They don't hear it, if that. The ones that come Friday night knew that we say it Friday night. I'm sure it's only got worse.
How do you combat that?
Bring your kids to shul.
How do you persuade people to do that?
I don't know. It's you know, we all think that we're the Paul cousins of, I don't know, Boreham Wood and Bushy nowadays is a huge community and so on. But first of all, I always remember our warden in Cardiff coming back from Woodside Park, where he'd been for Shabbos, said, they did get a minion, Shabbos Mincha. I said, he basically was saying, so it's okay when we don't get one. I said, well, it doesn't make me feel any better, but it's good to know other shuls struggle as well. And they have like 3 times the members. Shuls are struggling with people coming back now after COVID. Some of the numbers, Mitchell was telling me, some of the numbers in Bournemouth are shocking because people have got used to doing other things. People got out of the habit. So it's a much bigger issue even. If you would have gone back 5 years, we would be having this conversation about less affiliated people, but we'd be assuming that people who are Shomer Shabbat, Shomer Kashrut, or, you know, their kids in Jewish schools that are relatively committed would be involved in regular Jewish activities. And now, because of COVID, people have got out of the habit. It's a very serious problem. And the damage is, I'm not sure the damage is even Jewish identity, because I can send my child to a youth group and I can send my child to a Jewish school and they can have plenty of Jewish identity at home. The damage is, we always say that Jewish identity is formed at home, right? The damage is the lack of the damage to community and to social groupings, and particularly for those who rely on that. It's very, very difficult. Shabbos is a very communal time. We go to shul, we have meals together, we visit, and so on. You know, in terms of what Sally was saying, it's interesting. I mean, anyone been to New West End recently? Sure. So I
We
think,
don't go out and about, do we, because of COVID?
right, so it's interesting. New West End has no hall. It's just a shul. It's a huge sanctuary. It's a very beautiful space. Has a tiny,
Downstairs.
yeah, but it's not big. No, New West End, not very big. New West End doesn't. Central Shul has just built a beautiful suite downstairs, and Western Marble Arch has a suite. Can't remember what it's called. Might be called the Wallenberg Suite, actually. I don't think it might be, because it's Wallenberg Place where it is. Anyway, they have Simcha rooms, but New West End doesn't, because it was built as a shul. Princess Road in Liverpool is just a huge shul, basically. The hall is often an afterthought. Nowadays, nobody in their right mind would build a shul like that, right? You build a multi-purpose shul that works for different purposes, because the nature of places of worship has definitely changed across the board, right? Why are all these places of worship hosting, you know, vaccination clinics and what else? You know, sometimes shuls host parlor meetings, or Cardiff once we did, the local police wanted to have a community, whatever they call it, discussion, and we used the shul for that. Why not? You know, it's a place of gathering. There's another issue as well, which is that basically peer groups are very important, who we associate with. So when you place community at the heart of religious life by giving it a space, which is the shul, the mishkan, at a time which is Shabbos, you're also basically harnessing the power of community. Now, the golden calf showed the power of community to go wrong, yes? Mass hysteria. So there's always that downside, right? It's like anything, right? You have a group of teenagers, they can be incredibly empowered to go do good work and good things and mentor people and do charity work, and they encourage each other who can get the most sponsorship, and they can also be, you know, delinquent because they rub each other up the wrong way, right? That's always been the case. It's always the risk of large gatherings. So you have to be careful who you mix with. Let's see what Maimonides says about who you should mix with. Who would like to be Maimonides? Any volunteers?
I'll read.
Right. So this is from his Hilchot Dayot, from his Mishnah Torah. So basically, if anyone studied Mishnah Torah, it's really interesting stuff. It is halacha, but it has a bit of philosophy, I would say, as well. This is not philosophy, but it's a bit more kind of, yeah, it's a bit more philosophical. It's not like how to eat kosher and how to keep Shabbat. It's much more kind of wistful, if you like. And it's, you know, it's philosophical, and it's what we call machshava, Jewish thought. So yes, please go for it.
Excuse me. It is natural for a man's character and actions to be influenced by his friends and associates, and for him to follow the local norms of behaviour. Therefore, he should associate with the righteous and be constantly in the company of the wise, so as to learn from their deeds. Conversely, he should keep away from the wicked who walk in darkness, so as not to learn from their deeds. This is implied by Solomon's statement, Proverbs 13:20. He who walks with the wise will become wise, while one who associates with fools will suffer. Similarly, Psalms 1:1 states, happy is the man who has not followed the advice of the wicked. A person who lives in a place where the norms of behaviour are evil and the inhabitants do not follow the straight path should move to a place where people are righteous and follow the ways of the good.
Okay, a bit more.
If all the places with which he is familiar and of which he hears reports follow improper paths, as in our times, like now, or if he is unable to move to a place where the patterns of behaviour are proper because of the presence of bands of raging troops or for health reasons, he should remain alone in seclusion.
Or house prices, right? Yeah.
As Ahaz says, let him sit alone and be silent. If they are wicked and sinful and do not allow him to reside there unless he mingles with them and follow their evil behaviour, he should go out to caves, thickets and deserts, rather than follow the path of the sinners, as Jeremiah states, who will give me a lodging place for wayfarers in the desert.
Wow. So basically, be very careful who you mix with. So ideally, mix with the right kind of people. You walk with the wise or become wise. What happens if you live in a place where, unfortunately, that's not the norm? Then you have to distance yourself. Then it's better that you should seclude yourself. If they won't even let you do that, they hound you and harass you, then you basically have to go into exile. So how often do we hear somebody was a good boy or a good girl as a teenager, but they fell in with the wrong crowd, right? Sometimes you hear that and you think, that's a bit of an excuse. But it's probably often true that depending on who influences you and who your influences are, that's how you turn out. People go to university, they find a nice JSOC and they fall in with the right kind of crowd, then it can be a very positive experience. If they don't and they don't find that crowd, then it's not. For example, right, or school or anywhere.
This is a very good example to give to parental people who want to become parents. It's a good grounding for parenting.
Right. In what sense?
You have a responsibility to encourage your children to be with the right people.
Right.
For example, maybe we should send it to the television, to the films, and all these people who show stuff that I think kids copy.
What happens when, by associating with the right people in perhaps say cultural terms, they're actually a bad influence?
What does that mean, cultural terms?
Well, I'll give you a slightly different example. I know of a girl who's from a very traditional Jewish home. Actually, her father's a Cohen, as it happens. She married out. She married a boy from a Welsh chapel background. His father had been a minister. His father was no longer alive. Mother was alive. When he got engaged to a Jewish girl, his mother said, "Have you thought about the kids?" He said, "Yes." He said, "We'll take them to synagogue on Saturday, church on Sunday, and, they'll choose." She said, "No." She said, No. So you don't understand. She said, "If you marry a Jewish woman, your kids will be Jewish and they'll be raised as Jewish." And he was fine with that. I have to say that they're amongst the more involved people in the community. But the interesting thing is that if you ask this girl how she ended up with this actually really nice, very decent, but non-Jewish gentleman, she will tell you that she dated a bunch of Jewish guys, probably all from certain areas of London, by all accounts, and they were shallow and they were just, superficial, and they had no depth to them, and they were just, very fake, and she didn't like that. She wanted someone more sincere and genuine. So what do you do in that situation? What do you do when your child is in an Orthodox school, maybe mixing with people who have similar, some of my kids have extremely badly behaved classmates, but they have the same religious values. So, it's one of the quirks of life that you find. I mean, this is not an absolute, but I think it's a good rule of thumb that if you look at I hate putting labels on people, but let's just do it for a minute. If you look at the kind of religious spectrum, if the right is more kind of Haredi and the left is kind of more, sort of Mizrahi, Dati Leumi, and whatever you want to call it, modern Orthodox, that you always find I always find that people at the left end of the spectrum are much more courteous in terms of, etiquette and just common decency and awareness, social awareness, perhaps, should we say, of social norms. People at the right end are obviously more fanatical about halachic things, but often they're lacking perhaps some of these social norms. So, you had it when I was in New York. There was a shul that had opened up that was kind of looked down upon because it's a bit more modern. It was for the people that didn't fit into the more kind of from box. And they had quite an interesting range of attendees, but they would raise the most money for tzedakah, and they would be the ones that would go and distribute, care packages, and they would be the ones offering, I don't know, whatever it was, lifts to people that needed a lift to the vaccination, whatever it is. They were often the most active. So although they were seen in the wider community as being not as from, if you like, but in the communal sense, they were much more active, which is really interesting. So, what do you do when your kid comes home from school and says, I've made some really nice friends, I'm not sure I could eat in their homes. They don't keep as strictly kosher as we do, but they're really decent people. They're really law-abiding. They're really kind. They look out for each other. The truth is, the answer to that is okay. So you can have friends that, know that when you go around to a house, they get kosher milk for you. It's not the end of the world. But it's definitely, I mentioned earlier that one of the challenges of a community sometimes is, so it's wonderful that you have a broad church of people that all gather together, but sometimes you have people who are thrown together purely because of, you do a young professional event, and let's say there's, I don't know, so you get 20 young Jewish professionals. They might all be from very different social groups, and their only thing they have in common is they're all Jewish. Now, sometimes that works really nicely, and sometimes it's really challenging. Or you go to yeshiva with a bunch of guys your age, who the only thing you have in common is that you want to learn in yeshiva. They're all from different backgrounds and different political affiliations and different different hobbies. That's not the end of the world.
Yes.
But, if I was seeking friendships, I would probably look for people that have similar interests to me, wouldn't I? It's funny. So that's a downside as well. But we see from Rambam the importance of having good friends, right? Anyone who's ever had kids knows that's true. Ellie's in upper 6 now, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, they call it nowadays. He's nearly finished school. We are very thankful that he has a wonderful group of friends, quite diverse in their kind of, from different communities, but they all look out for each other and they're a good peer group. They basically, during lockdown, set up covers to learn together on the phone, on Zoom or whatever. They're not out taking drugs together, which is great. And they're a positive influence on each other. You see 100%. Peer groups. So it's true of adults as well. We all know that. So it's Rambam's advice. So when Moshe gathers the people, there's a very important message here. It's the power of community, both for good and for bad. Right? Sometimes you can have the power of, unfortunately, a lot of people can easily be, stirred up to for nefarious purposes, but they can also easily be stirred up for positive purposes as well. So that's what we see. So the antidote to the golden calf, which was a huge communal exercise of gathering everyone together for this rebellion, is to gather everyone together for holy things, which is Shabbos, time, Mishkan, space, and more broadly, that's what our shuls do. That's what our communities do. We gather people together. Right? If anyone's, when people go through Geirus, I'm not even going through Geirus, if somebody is trying to be more observant, and you have a young family, the tillers are moving, at the end of the day, if you have a young family, you're trying to be more observant, it's challenging not to have a peer group around. Person's going through Geirus, they will be encouraged at some point to live in a more religious community. People say, why? So if you're objective for a minute, why would I want to, it's very nice around here, and many of us grew up around here and all the rest of it, but it is challenging for kosher facilities. So if kosher facility is very high on your priority list, or you've never had that experience and you want to experience it, then this is not the place to do it. You walk down the street in Bournemouth, Edgware, there's kosher restaurants everywhere. If I'm a traditional Jewish kid, I'm not going to go look for a kosher pizza shop, but if there's a street full of kosher places, I might well go to one. So my family, we know if we want to eat out, we have to go further afield. But for other people, it becomes a challenge. So yes, having community, having infrastructure, having positive influences is always very, very important. Right, that's basically today's share. It's a bit shorter, fewer sources. So, yeah, any contributions or thoughts?
I think you have to be very, very careful when you talk about the fact that this less than, yes, so
I missed all that. So you're making a loud wind noise.
oh, there is no wind.
She didn't mean that, Sally.
No challenge.
I was just thinking that this area has produced a lot of people who have done a lot of good things.
Right, and quite a lot of committed people. So let me ask you a question. How do you think that they sustain that commitment? Your kids be a good example. I know the answer. I know the answer because people from Liverpool always said that when you come from a smaller community, you have to punch above your weight, basically. You can't take it for granted. So those that are prepared to make the effort and show the commitment will go far. Those who are kind of like in the, in the back seats, if you like, the back benches, it's much more challenging. Because if you don't take, just Kashrut as an example, or, how many, if I wasn't in my position, I'm raising my kids in South Woodford, how many families with similar age children are home for Shabbos that they can go around and play with? The answer is very few. That's a challenge. It's not an insurmountable challenge, but it's a challenge.
So would we be better off? Sorry, go on, Beryl.
If all the people that got from and moved and stayed here, it would be a fantastic community.
There is that argument. I think sometimes, I know some of my predecessors kind of get a bit of stick because they actively probably encourage people to move. I don't actively encourage it. First of all, I don't think people listen to me about where to buy a house. Rabbi, where should I move to? But if somebody will come to have a conversation about moving, first of all, I think it's different. If you have children and you're raising your children, peer group is really important. If you're a bit older already, I'm not saying it's not important as well, but it's slightly less of a, challenge possibly. But I would go out on a limb and say, I'm not sure. Because if somebody's become more frum and wants to live in, let's say, Edgware, hypothetically, very nice community, nothing wrong with it, because they want that kind of an environment, and in a short space of time, they may well become accustomed to going to a shul where everyone is basically like them. I'm going to go out on a limb, and maybe I'm being unfair, and say I'm not sure how tolerant they would be of your more traditional community. I have seen, it's something that I'm very grateful for that I have not seen in our shul. I certainly saw it a lot in Liverpool. You had a little bit of an older generation of more religious people who were quite condescending and often off-putting to those who perhaps wanted to learn more. So, for example, when somebody came to shul who was struggling to read Kaddish or put on tefillin, people didn't explicitly point fingers at them, but you had a sense that some of the older generation were kind of rolling their eyes. That's not nice, it's not nice. Here when people come to our shul, people are very friendly, they help them. People don't feel talked down to because they're struggling to read Kaddish, or that's very nice. So sometimes, it's interesting, I went to strategic ages and ages ago. Joe Gross had when they did the strategic review of the United Synagogue, she had a meeting, invited rabbis to come. And I think there were about a dozen of us from all over actually. And we sat around the table and asked different things. And almost all of us said that sometimes it's very hard to cater to the more frum end of the community. I had a chap in Liverpool who complained that my sermons were too basic. He wanted something much more in depth, but the trouble is most people didn't, but he didn't recognize that. And I think all the rabbis basically said that it's very difficult sometimes when you have a more frum element of a community, because if they don't appreciate the diversity of the community, then it doesn't work, because they have a very specific need, right? Take a very simple example. Someone's becoming more religious and they turn up one day, and they say, which is not unheard of in the Shtiblach in Northwest London or Northeast London for that matter, well, Stamford Hill, I think we should have a separate Kiddush, separate men and women. That's what they do in Stamford Hill. That's what they do in Golders Green. And you say, okay, but our shul's not like that. Well, I think we should. I think it's halacha, Rabbi. Sorry, but I think we should. And you say, well, that doesn't work for our community. For example, I'm just giving an example. I don't know what else you could have. But sometimes it can be very difficult. If people are kind and tolerant and easygoing, it works fine. It can be beautiful when you have a few committed people who are a bit more Shomer Shabbos. First of all, it helps to sustain a minyan. And second, it's very nice to have places that people can go for a meal. But some communities, the rabbi is literally the only kosher home that someone could go for a meal, a visitor, And when we were in Cardiff, we had a student who was very strictly kosher. And I would have sent him to more places, but he was very particular where he was going to eat. There was basically only us and one other place. Came for meals every week, which is fine. And we got to know him very well, but it's quite challenging. So I think if all the people who became more frum had stayed in the area, I don't know, because also someone's becoming newly religious, they have a kind of burst of energy and they can be a bit extreme at the beginning. And sometimes they can be a bit off-putting to other people. So there's a lot of factors in that. Sometimes I think in the nicest way possible, we might be well rid of some people. Other people, I think, it's a great loss. I meet some of the alumni of our shul and they're wonderful people. I think, gosh, imagine like Jeff and Elaine, imagine if they would have stayed here. But anyway, there you go. People move, it happens.
I think that some of the people in northwest London are not very welcoming. They're not very friendly. They look down on lots of people. But going back to what you were saying about more from people in our community, sometimes they think they know everything and they don't have to try. And that can be off-putting, as you say, for people that want to get a bit more religious.
Right. So I don't think I've met too many people like that here. I've definitely met them in my past. I can definitely think of communities where they exist, and it's very off-putting. I know of a certain shul where it's a couple of wardens. One, their wife wears a shaitel, and The other is they're relatively observant, which is very nice, but they come across as quite arrogant is the word that comes to mind. It's not very nice, to be honest. It's off-putting. And then you as the rabbi have to say, well, that's not what Judaism is all about, really. That's just that person. That can be very difficult.
It's interesting that the shuls where they currently are situated, I think some of them were a bit random. And the idea that you would put a shul where the people are has disappeared, because people are living in far more fun places. They're not quite as close together, I don't think, as they used to be.
If you look at the size of London, the notion of having shuls in walking distances is almost impossible, because people are not all gathered around small places. We look at like Epping, yes, the community there's growing, but they're not in walking distance. I mean, all this Hatfield and whatever, people are quite spread out, Hertfordshire, and people are quite spread out.
That's to do with the cost of living.
But it's interesting. I just, maybe I won't name the name of who the colleague was, but when Michael and Dana had their engagement party, it was the week of Hazinu. And I'm going to embarrass Pam and Julian now. I made the comment, Hazinu, we know it says, Hazinu Shemaim Ba'Davei V'Sishma Haaretz in Refi, that Moshe says, listen, heavens and earth, please pay attention to my words. And Rashi says, why does he use a different phrase? Because when he's talking to the heavens, he can be quite harsh and sharp, because the heavens won't take offense. When he's talking to the mere earthlings, it has to be a little bit more diplomatic. And it's a paradigm for basically moderating your every teacher knows you have to have different approaches for different children. So I think I made the comment that Pam and Julian were, on the one hand, extremely committed, but on the other hand, extremely friendly and non-judgmental of others, and that was a very good quality to have. And it's interesting, one of my colleagues from this area who was there said to me the next week, he said, I was thinking about what you said. It really got me thinking about the more religious elements in my own community. And are they actually welcoming to others? Are they actually an asset, or are they sometimes almost detrimental? It sounds strange, but it can be detrimental sometimes. I remember a gentleman in Cardiff who used to come to Minion once a week, who told me that in the old days, when the community was very, very frum, he would never have set foot in shul. And as the more frum element moved away and the people from the outside came into the center, it became much more diverse. And then there's another interesting discussion the United Synagogue as an organization has, that the people who become more frum tend to go outside of the United Synagogue. That's why Alei Tzion was ostensibly formed, to have a more kind of religious Shomer Shabbat type of a shul, but within the United Synagogue. So that's a whole interesting discussion in itself. My ideal world would be to have people who are either are already or become more observant, but at the same time do it with a very warm and non-judgmental approach to others. So then you don't have that problem.
First of all, you've got to fix the education system locally, because our Jewish schools, if people are very culturally Jewish and they have Jewish identity, but they're not very interested in the... I don't know what you're talking about. King Solomon fosters a love of lifelong learning. It's in the ethos. Rabbi Brakira, the parents.
It doesn't work with the kids either. When was it?
No, it doesn't work with the kids, because the parents need to be more educated than the children. Like we used to learn, I know all the things I learned before I got married, before such things as this existed, were at home, and we didn't ask any questions. This is meat and this is milk and this is how it is. Don't ask any questions, you just do it. Sure. Now that is true, I think, of my generation, some of my peer group, probably not most of them. But we didn't have the school. We didn't have a place to learn. Right. And so we sort of... So this is the infamous Jewish school discussion. If you take KS... I have nothing against... No. If you take KS as an example, and I'm not having a dig at KS, but it's a fact that if you look in their ethos, it says to foster a love of lifelong learning. Now, Rabbi Brakira, when he was here from Aish, said to me, he said, how many King Solomon students, when they leave school, seek out a Jewish learning opportunity? The answer is probably statistically insignificant. So where's this lifelong love of Jewish learning? It's not being fostered. You said lifelong learning. No, I meant Jewish learning. It says specifically Jewish. All learning, but Jewish learning as well. So the answer is clearly... That comes from home. It's not down to schools. I think that's the responsibility. I would say, okay, look at myself.
I would say I got that from home, but I definitely got it from school as well. I had teachers who were interesting, inspiring. They made I had great Jewish studies teachers who had an impact on me to this very day. And it is possible, it can happen. But I had a Jewish studies teacher who was so inspirational that even the kids from completely non-religious homes enjoyed learning Jewish studies, enjoyed it. They enjoyed it. They enjoyed going for tests and quizzes because they found it interesting. It is possible to do that. Whether we're doing it or not, I don't know, but it is definitely possible.
Just out of interest, Rich, the next
Can't hear you, Pam.
we haven't got the proper mic.
Oh, that's better. Yep.
Just out of interest, Rich and Esther were inspired at KS. They had great statistics.
Still can't hear you. A bit closer to the microphone.
Pam said her kids were inspired at KS.
Wow.
No, I'm sure there are kids that are. And it's not just KS, by the way, JFS, JCOS, all these schools, Hasmo even, not everyone has an inspirational experience. The problem is that's where our kids are getting their Judaism from. So that's the challenge.
I don't know if this is possible with a big school, but when we had Cheder at Coventry Road, the children that came to Cheder, we had a parents group for learning, that they were learning alongside their children so that they knew what the children were learning.
We always did that. We used to do that. We used to have things for the parents in Cheder. It worked to varying degrees. Doesn't seem to work in the schools. They don't seem to do it as much. They do it once in a while. They have this Sinai project from South Africa where the parents come in and learn with the kids. But to have also the Cheder makes more sense. It's Sunday morning. You can run a parallel thing for parents. I don't think the schools are as successful in doing that. We used to do that as well. We called it family enrichment days, and it was very successful.
Years ago, when Michael started school, Sally, Deborah, I don't know if you remember this, but they used to have keep one step ahead of your child, which I went to, those classes. But I have to say, I've never kept one step ahead of Michael.
I know what you mean.
We used to do things at Cheder when we had
half a mile away.
people. We would do things on a Sunday morning, which would bring lots of parents in. And what's her name, Pam? Who's now JVN?
Nikki Goldman.
Yeah, we used to do side by side and a whole host of programs.
I think it's just a different mindset as well. People used to do things out of duty more. People would go to shul out of duty, they go to Cheder. It was just expected. It was normal. It wasn't even up for discussion. I don't know. I don't remember if I enjoyed Cheder or not, but I wasn't given any choice. You go to Cheder. That's what you do on Sunday. That's what we do. We're Jewish. I didn't even question it.
Only on Sunday. You're lucky. We went 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Well, I then went to school. 6 days a week after that, Jewish school. But I think there's a lot of factors in that. But yes, peer group, very important. Community, very important. That's what we see from all.
So how do we bring the teens with their parents in? Because I think teens are much more difficult.
So Esther's finding at the moment, you contact people, you say we're looking to do some events, and they don't quite say this. What they basically say is kids in a Jewish school
don't need you.
They're getting it already. I'm not worried, basically.
Does Esther contact the people who are not in a Jewish school?
Yes. So they're more interested, but then you've got the problem of fragmentation, because you need a cohesive group of people. You need a critical mass, and that's the challenge. So the youth groups were decimated when the Jewish schools took off, weren't they? JLGB is struggling here. BA doesn't even exist anymore. Tribe struggles around these parts, certainly, to get adherence. Youth groups used to be key.
There's no kids here, that's why, Rabbi. There's no kids here.
There are. But there are.
Where are
if I give you some statistics, I can only speak for what I know of the United Synagogues and the Federation and Chabad and unaffiliated, and I'm sure ads and reform ads more. But of the 3 main US shuls, if you like, I think we have about 150 children under 18 on our mailing list. I think Cranbrook has a slightly larger number, and I think Chigwell has about 300. That makes a total of about 600 children under 18. So that's about, what is it? 30 or 40 per year group.
Blue car.
Yeah, that's between 30 and 40 per year group. If they all come.
Where are they?
Well, that's a different question. That's a different question. It's a very tough one.
Quite surprised. I'm quite surprised.
I look around Shul on Shabbos morning, and by and large, we are providing services with a small s to an older membership. And most of our new members that join, and we're getting a bunch, which is very nice, are slightly older. And that's not only our shul is experiencing that, it's pretty much across the board.
I'll bring you two little people.
Exactly.
Please do.
But there's a lovely feeling in Chuld. It's a lovely.
People love children. You know, it's an annoying thing. People in our shul are really nice to kids. They just don't come. Yes, yeah. It's like a very child-friendly environment. It's hilarious. I mean, it's not hilarious. It's quite sad.
How is your Shabbos Lobbos?
Which one?
He tells me that I am a Shabbos Lobbos, and I
Who?
told him that he
Moshe.
is Moshe. I told him
That's funny.
he is the Shabbos Lobbos. And he
Okay.
laughs. He hasn't met Tilly yet.
Listen, I could argue the other way. I mean, one thing Nicola said to me, you know, at the moment their kids get noticed because there's very few kids in shul. Pretty much any shul they go to in Edgeware, they're going to disappear into the crowd. That has a price as well. I was one of the only kids in shul when I was growing up, and I got lots of attention. Probably made me enjoy shul. Yeah, you know, so I can argue against community as well. You know, and when you're in a community where there's about 10 men in the minyan, and you know, I mean, Julian wasn't well. Hopefully, a few people might have asked you how you're doing. I don't know if they did or didn't, but I know generally when someone misses minyan, people notice because we have a small core. You know, someone misses minyan in Kinloss, nobody notices because there's 40 or 50 people there. It's a completely different world, you know. Anyway,
yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that.
So maybe the answer is that small communities are good, basically.
Yeah, I agree.
That.
I actually agree
You know?
with that. But that's going to die off us, isn't it?
Oh,
The thing is
most,
that-
you know, the shuls that are popular when you go to from neighborhoods are not generally huge cathedral shuls. They're little steeples where you have a small core of people. They all know each other. They're all friendly. You know, it's like a small room. It's a hamisha feeling. It's not very successful. It's not a sustainable financial model. Right? If you're a shul that needs to employ a full-time rabbi and admin staff and maintain premises like a large building, it doesn't work. But honestly, if you're just meeting once a week in someone's basement or, you know, in a school or something, it works very well. And it's a lovely feeling to go into a small, intimate environment, actually. I think it's a lovely feeling. I think it's much nicer. I don't think these huge shul buildings that the United Synagogue built that they can't fill, or they fill once a year, I think the whole thing is just sterile. You know, it's really hard.
I agree with everything you're saying.
But
Ours is an aging, it's not a young people's there. There's no people, no young.
I restate what I said, that we're definitely shrinking, but there's definitely more than we think. When we did our baby blessing, we sent out an invite to, in the last 2 years that we were aware of, I think about 25 babies. Now, a number of those are completely unaffiliated, but almost all of them have grandparents who are members of either ours or another local shul. So they are the third generation or second generation. So there's a much bigger discussion there as to what's happened there. And many of them still go around for Friday night and, you know, Seder and whatever, but they don't affiliate. It's very tough. Anyway, must go. I'm sure people have to go as well.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I would like to know how many rabbis visit the maternity ward and actually see Jewish women who have just given birth at that point.
Allowed in.
That's a bit difficult. They're not
So
there.
I can answer that one for you. Obviously, maternity tends to be quite a women-centric place. When we've been aware of people we know have had babies pre-COVID, Blima used to go and visit usually. That was more appropriate, obviously. So I think Rebbitzins can and should. But we often don't know. You get a call from someone saying, oh, my son had a baby last week. That's the answer to that. When it's somebody you know.
Do the hospitals have a process whereby, for example, someone says, oh, I want a kosher meal?
Right. So that's a very interesting. So in an ideal world, you've just touched on a very interesting topic. If somebody ordered a kosher meal in an ideal world, the Jewish chaplain, who I haven't seen myself at Whips, would get notified, but they don't. There's GDPR and there's all kinds of issues. In an ideal world, Or in an ideal world, when the chaplains are going visiting and they see someone's having a kosher meal, they would say, oh, a Jewish patient. That's not what happens. They offer a visit from the rabbi, and often people don't necessarily want it. One thing when I did my training with the junior doctor, I said, don't wait for the patient to request it. If you are concerned, if you have a Jewish patient and you are concerned about their religious needs, phone the chaplain and say, I'd like to talk about my patient. They don't have to request a rabbi. They've said, I'm Jewish and, I want kosher food and whatever. And the doctor thinks, well, I want to meet this patient's needs, but I don't know what that means. Phone me up, ask me. That's legitimate, surely. But there's GDPR issues with that. In the days when Belinda used to visit, I used to get lists of Jewish patients. Now it's much more complicated. You're right. That's why, I mean, I meet all kinds of people at Shivers. And when I can, I try to go home and write down the information, because quite often, I mean, Lynn keeps the stuff as well. Quite often you'll meet at a Shiva someone's, 3 daughters who live locally, none of whom are affiliated with the community, who all have kids. We try to keep in touch. Something we've been doing as a group is saying we often have a member that's passed away who has family who are not affiliated anywhere. And we're trying to keep in touch with that family because we have a connection. It's a massive job. It's a massive, massive job. Some people are better at it. It moves completely away from the membership model, because suddenly it's not about whether people are paying members anymore. It's about awareness of Jewish people living in your area and trying to get them involved in your activities, basically. Exactly. But it's huge. It's huge. It's networking, and I'm sure all of us can think of at least 2 people we know, possibly in our own families, who wouldn't show up on the statistics on the census because they're not members of a shul and don't go to a Jewish school and they don't affiliate. I'm sure we all know people. That's why I always think that you can probably triple the number of Jews in the country, because whatever they come up with is often based on synagogue memberships. And that's very, very false. Anyway, it's an interesting topic. Yeah, we must, I'm going to sign off.
Thank you,
nice,
Rabbi.
lively discussion. We can't fix all the world's problems, but anyway. I would just add one thing, observationally, from 20 years in the rabbinate. One of the biggest barriers to access seems to have been the perception of, possibly unfairly, in previous generations, that the rabbis were very scary. So we've had situations where you invite someone around for a Shabbos meal and they say to their friends, I don't want to go. I won't know what to do or say. I'll be so embarrassed. I would never have gone to the Rav's house in the old days. So I think we've had a change also that possibly hasn't totally filtered down. So I get people, I'll meet someone in hospital and say, Rabbi, I'm a bad Jew. You'd be ashamed of me. I'm like, you don't know me. Let's start from the beginning. Okay, nice to meet you. I've come to visit you. So I think there's a lot of that about as well, the fire and brimstone still, which is not generally found. But anyway, interesting topic. Right, have a good week, everyone. See you next week.
And you.
If not before.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Safe travels, Brenda.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and have a lovely time.
Have a good
with your
trip.
little one.
I was going to say, can we log on when we're in Israel?
You can just do it through this. Just remember the time difference.
I'll take the number down.
Well, you can do it. The easiest way to do it is just through the web, through Zoom.
Can do that.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully,
just remember. It'd be lovely to see you. Just remember the time difference.
Time difference.
Yeah.
We will.
Okay. Safe travels. Wish them all mazel tov.
But I won't now. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Have a lovely time with your little one.
Yeah.
Oh yes, lovely. Thank you.